Josh would have been a good command sergeant major.
Dude, you were ridiculous with that. I don't understand that at all.
Neither do I.
Anyone? Well, because Josh, maybe in the 2000s might not have been a good sergeant major, command sergeant major, but I think a Sergeant Major Plumley, and I think of Josh. And part of the reason he would make a good command sergeant major is because he thinks he would not be a good one. Oh no, it's like that. You want that president who doesn't want to be president. Josh don't want it, so therefore he should have it.
I don't know. There would be chaos. People would be walking on the grass, hands in their pockets, cats and dogs living together.
No, they wouldn't.
It'd be mass hysteria.
No, they wouldn't.
Today's Army would not let him be a good sergeant major.
You're right.
Today's Army won't let anybody be a good sergeant major.
I don't know. Well, maybe. We'll see what old Mr. Hegseth does.
Well, the first thing he needs to figure out is the U.S. Army Drill Sergeant School.
What happened there?
Did you see the photo that I posted? The chain of command board. They had some caricature of Trump up there on their chain of command board. So, and I think we got in on it early because Shu Samasaur posted it on X. So I took the photo, turned around, I put it on our Facebook and X, and I think U.S. Army WTF Moments got it from us because they posted about 5 minutes after we did, and I tagged them. When I posted on Facebook, I tagged them. I tagged SecDef. I tagged Secretary of the Army.
Hey, we live in a different world now, right? Okay. Some people are arguing it's like, is probably somebody on staff duty just making a funny. And okay, I kind of get that. But we live in a different world now. We live in a world of social media where the other side is going to freak out. So since you're allowed to freak out, we're allowed to freak out too. I understand the whole, but at the Drill Sergeants Academy, like I could see it happening like Alpha Company 519th, of the 18th 525 18th Airborne Corps. I could see that. But sorry about that. But yeah, man, the drill sergeant school, hey, man, turnabout is fair play. We get to freak out about this.
You normally just don't see it at that level, though, right? You might see it because, dude, it was some E4 ACQ or whatever. And, you see a funny picture of the first sergeant they threw up there or whatever. Like we've had some Photoshop photos back in the debt that we were made to take down, things like that. That's fun and games. You never see it up at that level. And heaven forbid if anybody would have done that. It goes back to your point. If anybody would have done that to Joe Biden or Barack Obama, they would have flipped their lid. And I tell you what, I bet the person who did it is a Trump supporter. I bet the new photo hadn't made it down yet. They were tired of seeing Joe Biden up there. And he's like, you know what? Screw this. I'm drawing my own picture and going to put that shit up there.
That's funny. Did I tell you guys the story about the chain of command picture series at the embassy in Slovenia when I was there? Y'all heard that one?
No.
Okay, if I need to back off the mic, Roger, okay, I will. I don't know what's going on. Maybe maybe they're too tall.
No, it's been so long since we've recorded. You've forgotten, right? You've forgotten the TTPs. Been long.
I think whatever. Okay, so so it's the embassy. I get there in September, late August, September of 2017. Okay, so it's been a while. He's inaugurated on January 20th. I get there, to the embassy and on the set in September, and I noticed that Trump's picture wasn't up there. Now, they did not have Barack Obama's picture up there, but they didn't have Trump's. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. But I didn't say anything because I'm the new guy, and I'm the DOD caveman walking around their, glass house. So I just, don't make any waves. Well, there are American expats and people with dual citizenship living in Slovenia, and they have relationship with the embassy. One guy in particular who owned a restaurant that all the Marines love to go to. Everybody loved to go to it. It's burger place, little taste of Americana. And he's half American, half Slovenian. Big time Trump supporter. Met this guy real early on. But he came into the embassy one time for a meeting. He was going to cater an embassy function. He saw that there was no picture of Trump up there and went absolutely ballistic. And this was like October, November. He went ballistic. This is a guy who's got dual citizenship stuff, but they changed it after he went ballistic and made a scene in the embassy. They finally put Trump's picture up. This is State Department. So, State Department hates pretty much anybody right wing except for Marco Rubio, maybe. But yeah, so that was a pretty good story. It took a half Slovenian, half American dual citizen to get the embassy to change the photo. After how many months? It's coming up on a year.
It's wild.
It's unacceptable.
Well, I mean, there's no excuse not to have it now. I mean, it's like, hey, the election happened. I mean, it's a 50-50 choice, right? So November 5th, 6th, 7th, you know who won. So you've got 2 months to get those photos out. I don't care where you're at.
Yeah. Well, the excuse they used, the embassy, was, well, he hasn't taken his official photo yet, which is half true, believe it or not. Trump didn't take an official photo until almost a year after he was inaugurated.
That's fair. That's fair enough.
But the photo they started unofficially sending out was him with the scowl, not the smiling Donald Trump. So that's the one they put up.
His mugshot.
No, that was in 2017.
I know. I'm saying very similar to that.
Yeah, very similar to that same pose. You're right. Yeah. Gosh, we had a list of stuff we were going to talk about.
We did. It's been so long. I almost forgot we even had a podcast.
It's that whole day job thing, man. We need to do because Joe Rogan pretty much puts something out every day.
No. Maybe maybe 2 a week, 2 or 3 a week.
Okay, maybe it's just how I see it on Spotify. Even 2 or 3 a week. I mean, that dude's busy, man. I mean, now granted, I know it's like his job, so you make money. So versus us doing, our 8-hour a day job, that's what you're doing. But man, these guys that do this, every day or 2-3 times a week, that's a lot of dedication, man. Well, much more dedication you're going to get from C3.
They get paid. So, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference,
Yeah. I think the three of us, at least me, I've been traveling more than I have in a really long time. So when you're on the road, there's that, I bring my computer with me and stuff, but there's that hesitation to do it. 'Cause, there's just, you're hesitant. Cause I think we had an opportunity to do it when I was on the road, and maybe when you guys were, we just kind of waved it off, and I wouldn't call it laziness. It's just like, what if the internet's not good enough, stuff like that. But all I'm doing is making excuses. You know what they say?
It was laziness.
Yeah, you're right.
It was laziness.
At the end of the day. But I don't really care, Margaret.
I don't really care, Margaret. That was one of the best interviews, and I want to get to that later. But so I guess to catch everybody up, you and Roger threw one down. I don't know. It feels like, 20 blue moons ago.
Right before Christmas.
But I guess it was right before Christmas. So Christmas, then we did. So the Ultra, we need to talk to Ultra real quick. So Luke and I went out to Houston and did the 100-mile ultra marathon. Luke had done it. Luke and listener Darren did it the previous year, and then because Luke's stupid, he volunteered to do it again, and because I'm stupid, I said I'll do it too. And so another listener, Jeremy, and his son came out with us. So the 4 of us, and then Luke's dad came out to make sure that we weren't too stupid, and make sure that we were fed and taken care of. And my thoughts on the ultra. It was a great experience for a great cause, right? Pediatric cancer. I thoroughly enjoyed doing it, like afterwards. Doing it during it just sucked. And Luke was spot on. Luke's like, hey man, he's up until about mile 60, it's all fun and games. And it was, we crushed 50 miles before we bedded down for a couple hours. We crushed 50 miles in about 15 hours, and it was, it wasn't bad. It was like, we were, walking around. It was the heat of the day. We're cracking beers. Everybody's out there with their marathon vest on and their bottles and all their, marathon gear. And Luke and I are out there, zero training, zero prep, cracking Coors Light, walking amongst them. And but it was, and then, backed out for a couple hours and they got it. But about mile 60, you're like, yeah, man, this sitting, kind of some of the fun's gone out of it. And then, dude, mile 70 to mile 95, you're just like, I just want to die. Like, this is just, it's not fun. At that point, it's just not fun. You just, you mentally check out, you go into another place, and you just kind of, you just zone out. Like, you legit, you just mentally check out, zone out, and,
Well, give you all a
push through.
little idea of the course and the ultra, the context of it all, if you will. So it's 55 hours, and you just try to cover as much distance as you can in 55 hours around a 0.69 mile loop. Okay. So imagine that. Like, our goal was to get 100 miles. I think that's a good goal. But some people go out there the year before, not this year, but the year before, the first year I did it, some girl went out and ran 217 miles in 55 hours. Like, amazing.
That's
Right. So
stupid.
some people, yeah, well, I mean, that's her job. She's a professional. But yeah, most people out there probably had a goal of 100. A few had a goal of 150, and maybe 4 or 5 had a goal of 200. So there are real, competitors out there. But like Josh was saying, man, you just kind of have to put your brain in a different spot, because like I said, that loop is less than a mile. I mean, the tedium sets in pretty quick. At about 40 laps, it's not that you're fighting the boredom, but it starts to set in. One thing I noticed before I go into that just a little bit is, well, one of the things I noticed is when I start to put my head down and start looking 3 feet in front of me is when when I know, okay, I need to put my head up. You need to get your head up, like Jordan Peterson says. And I don't think I told Josh that, but Jeremy, I told him a couple of times, it's like, dude, get your head up, bro. Get your head up. And I don't know if that helped or not, but I could see it. I'd come up from behind and I'd see his head hanging down. But, and like Josh said, dude, I mean, for me, he summed it all up. But I got to give Josh props right now. Is like the last 5 miles, maybe even 5 laps, bro, I was hurting, man. Like, I was hurting. There was something going wrong with my body. I think I had heat exhaustion earlier in the day. And the last 5 laps,
Was
I
it the
walked.
Coors Light that did that, or the vaping?
Well, I'll get into that in just a sec. I didn't vape. I did not vape. Well, maybe a couple times. But so I those last 5 laps I walked with Josh, and he totally got me through that. I'm not saying I would have quit because it's 5 laps, but I might have like sat down and like rested for 3 or 4 or 5 hours because I was just hurting so bad. My body didn't feel right. And the one thing that sticks out as I'm sitting there, I'm complaining to Josh, of all people. I'm complaining, like, dude, my shins, man, these shin splints. And I'd be like going, like gagging, about to throw up. And Josh goes, that's just the bitch leaving your body. And I was like, okay, that's what I needed. That's what I needed at that point. But I gotta say 2 things. I gotta give two shout outs other than Josh getting me through the last 5 laps. Darren, I don't know how you did it. Darren drank 29 beers through the time he did it. Darren finished about 38, 39 hours. And I was like, well, I can drink 30. Surely I can drink 30. I don't know how he did it. Because, yeah, I think the beer did kind of mess me up a little bit. I think I cracked my first one at mile 5 or 10. I think I got to 15 or 16. So basically half of what Darren did.
We started pretty early.
I could just tell, dude, this is not going to work. My body, when I drink this beer, my body I could feel it start to shut down. So I was like, Darren, dude, I got all props to Darren. I don't know how he did it. Yeah, so good on him. But back to real quick and kick back to Josh is, Jared, the listener, Jeremy, and his son did it. His son is 16 years old. He was the youngest kid, the youngest person to finish, to make 100 miles. He was the youngest one at 16. And man, that required a lot of fortitude on his part because, 16-year-old bulletproof, right? And yeah, in a marathon, oh, absolutely. He would have completely destroyed me and Josh, completely destroyed him. So he was kind of coming into it with that mentality of, I'm 16, these guys are old. Of course I'm going to blow their wheels off. And he was right up until like mile 30 or 40. And then the old, stupid, stubborn man kicked in on mine and Josh's part. And Jeremy stuck with his son. Jeremy stuck with his son. So as he should have. But this kid, Jeremy's son, he's like, I don't understand, Dad, how they're doing it. They won't stop. And I don't know what Jeremy explained to him, but the explanation is simple: is that we were in the Army for a very long time. We know how to be bored. We're stubborn. We're stupid. And we got people holding us accountable. And there's the thing, and this is props to Jeremy's son, is that He didn't have those things. He had his dad to hold him accountable, of course, but he didn't have that experience of knowing how to be bored, and just being that ultra stubbornness, just being bored and uncomfortable at the same time. But he still got through it. And man, just all shout out to him and Lister Jeremy. I was really impressed with how they handled themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, his son, and again, it was funny because we hit Waffle House for breakfast, the day prior to getting started, and then the morning of, and as he should have been, Jeremy's son was talking a little bit of smack to us. Again, as he should have been. I would have been talking mad smack too, and but yeah, he got a lesson in, like, hey man, there's some life experiences that he has now, but he didn't have prior to the start of that, and that's able to just mentally check out of whatever it is that you're doing that's painful and repetitive, and just do it while just putting your mind somewhere else. And it's like, bro, the army, years and years of army training will put us in that position. So
And
it was fun. Luke's doing it again next year, everybody. So anybody who wants to do it with Luke, feel free to go ahead and jump on.
So hey, I got a question for you guys. So what mile did the joke stop?
Oh, not just the jokes, everything. Because and John, okay, I'd say mile 80 for me.
Yeah.
Maybe mile
that's
80.
good.
And
That's good.
Josh and I stuck together pretty much the whole way.
Yeah.
And Josh, at one point, and I wanted to bring this up with you on the side, Josh, but I'll just talk about it now. You were making a strat because at one point, like mile 81 or 82, I was like, okay, MFer, stand up, and you better not be grouchy, man. We're gonna talk. We're gonna have a conversation. And he tried. Josh tried. He's like, so who would have won? Like all things equal, a hoplite or a Genghis Khan's horseman? And I sat there and I was like, man, in my mind, I'm thinking that's a really good question. I think I just said some things, and I realized I can't even have a conversation right now. I can't do it. And Josh realized it too. And we're just like, yeah, okay, I guess this is just gonna suck. But I'd say mile 80, Josh. I don't know where you hit it.
Yeah, it was somewhere between 70 and 80, to where it was just like kind of done talking, done. There were no deep thoughts. There was no critical thinking going on. It was, how many more laps do I have before I can stop? I just need to stop the pain. Because right now, like, it sucks. It sucks. There's nothing fun about it, dude. The next day is the absolute worst. When I flew out Thursday morning, like, I'm in Houston Hobby, hobbling through, and this lady's like flat out asked me, she was just some random, other passenger. She goes, "Sir, are you okay?" And I said, look, I was like, no, I'm not. And she just didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to respond to that. She just kind of like kept, kind of like walking, looking at me, staring. But it was just like, "Are you okay?" I was like, no, I'm not. Bro, like, yeah, dude, it sucked.
I think it was past mile 80, Josh, when I had the heat exhaustion. I guess, I don't know what it was. I've never had heat exhaustion in my life. Close to it, but not like that, where I couldn't think straight. I couldn't see. Everything was tunnel vision. And I was like, if I pass out on this course, they're going to they're going to bring the ambulance out, and I'm not going to be able to finish. Like, they're not going to let me finish. Fortunately, I was close to the tent, maybe 300 meters. And I was like, I just got to make it to the tent. And every step I was like, I can't pass out. So I get to the tent, which looked like a family of homeless, meth addicted raccoons lived in our tent that everyone could see. And I'm stumbling to my chair, and I step on Josh's medicated powder, the big Costco medicated powder. The top comes off and just sprays the entire tent. And I just like, I can just put the cap back on. And if I try to clean this up, I'm going to pass out. So I didn't. I just put the cap back on, and I just let the mess stay there. And Josh is, I don't know, 100 meters behind me. He comes into the tent, sees the mess, and he goes, he didn't go off the handle. He's like, what the F happened here? And I was like, listen to me, man. I need you to sit down because something's happened to me right now. It didn't get too mad, but man, there was medicated powder all over. It smelled like an old man in that tent.
It's like 2 pounds of medicated Gold Bond got laid in our tent.
The worst
Like
smell
like,
too, dude, because that never
bro,
goes
it was
away.
no, it was like, dude, it was like spraying Agent Orange all over, the Shaw Valley. Look
But
at
you
this
didn't
guy.
seem mad about it. You didn't seem mad about it.
Dude, at that point, I wasn't mad about anything other than the fact that I signed up to do that stupid shit. That was what I was mad at that point.
I
Um,
tell you, the after portion, there's, I wore the right shoes this time and the right socks. I used sandals quite a bit, so much that I wore a, little raw spot on the top of my toe from the sandals. That was a big thing. But last year, I lost almost all of my toenails. I think I kept 2 toenails on both feet. This year, I haven't lost any, but there's numbness. You got your pinky toe, the toe next to it on my right foot. It's still numb. So I was asking my dad, he was a marathon guy back in the day. Today, I was asking him, "What do you think that is?" He goes, "Oh, you absolutely pinched a nerve, or completely, permanently screwed it." So I may have permanently lost feeling in one of my toes for that stupid nonsense.
You know what's gonna happen, right? The Snowbird Foundation or whatever it is, Snowdrop or whatever it is, the people that do the ultra, they're gonna listen to this episode and they're gonna ask us to take it down because you are not helping other
Hey,
folks get out there and walk this 100-mile track.
the people that are out there, Josh, and correct me if I'm wrong. The people that are out there, it's a nice mix of people, right?
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
there are people who are doing it for real. Most of them are granola people, right? But there are also people out there who are doing it to suffer. I mean, that's part of it, to challenge themselves.
Yeah.
There was a dude out there that was built like a daggone linebacker. This dude was
Oh,
freaking
yeah.
jacked. And I was like, imagine all that weight coming down on your feet 250,000 times. I mean, so I want to say this, and I'll kick it to Josh. I'm done with the ultra. Is I know that there are listeners out there saying, I could do that. How hard is it? You didn't run hardly at all. You just walk 100 miles. How hard is it? One guy said, oh, yeah, I'll come out and I'll do it with a rucksack on. He didn't, but it's like if anybody out there wants to do this, I encourage you to do it. Truth be told, things stay as they are right now. I probably will do it again next year because I'm just that stupid. But if you want to come on out, man, and you'll experience it. But you will not enjoy the last 20 miles. That's all I'll say. It ain't easy.
No, it's certainly not easy. The first 50 miles are cake. 50 to 60, 50 to 70. You're like, not a big deal. It's fun. But from 70 to 80 to 100, it's suffering. That's all it is. It's just suffering. But again, it's for a good cause. And I'm the same as Luke. Things stand right now, I'll probably wind up and do it again because I'm
like I
dumb.
wrote, like I wrote in the chat, I feel like my last comment before I kicked to Josh was a little bit like maybe sound arrogant. It's exactly the opposite. Because if Josh and I and Jeremy and his son can do it, I mean, most of our listeners can do it too. Similar mindsets, similar, discipline. So I wasn't saying, you think you can do it, don't be so tough. No, man, I think you can do it. Come out and do it with us. It'll be funny. It's hilarious.
Well, and I did want to get the name right because it is an important, it's the Snowdrop Ultra 55-hour
Yeah.
race and relay. So I wanted to make sure
Yeah.
I joked about it, but I want to put that out there. But I think on a serious note, and I'm sure Jeremy, being the good father he is, that's part of one of several conversations he had with his boy. I think both of you guys brought it up. It's the accountability, right? It teaches you accountability. You get to the zoning out and all that stuff because of the accountability. The accountability says, hey, man, I got to do this. Like, I can't quit. People see me. I know me. I have my principles. They're doing it. I got to do it. I mean, you're held accountable for something that you committed to, and that leads to everything else. So speaking of accountability, Josh, within what, I guess 3 weeks, you had a couple of events there because you were in line for how many hours were you in line at like 18-degree weather?
Dude, we got, so myself and a couple listeners, Roger was there, the same time, but separately. We went to the inauguration festivities in DC. We had planned on going, prior to everything getting moved inside due to the inclement weather, and so we wound up on Sunday. By the time we got up and moving on Sunday, looking at stuff, we could not. There was already thousands of people in line for the victory rally, so we're like, okay, we're not going to make that. We went ahead and went down there, so we could, just kind of be part of the chaos. And that was really cool. But we wanted to make sure that we got in for the watch party on Monday because we knew that President Trump did not know that Elon Musk, but we knew President Trump, we knew Patel, and a couple others were going to come speak, after the inauguration. And so myself and Chris, one of our other listeners, we got in line on Monday morning. We were standing in line in downtown DC at 5:30 in the morning.
Dude, you sent that pic, and I'm like, you are out of your mind.
We left our Airbnb at like 3:30, in the morning, and we went down, dude. It was 17, 18 degrees, and we did not get inside until I believe right at 10. It was cold. It was it was cold for sure. But no, I mean it was good. I got some more stuff to say on that.
Well, real quick, the only reason I made it in there, so I went with my wife, and then we're like, okay, we'll go down, and we got all these quote unquote expedited tickets, right? So it says, hey, just go to the expedited ticket lane and whatever. There ain't no damn expedited ticket lane. So anyway, by the time I get there, we get there like right at 9:00 or maybe a few minutes after 9:00. And the line, it zigzags, it goes back and forth, and it snakes all. By the time we got in there, it was back to like 3rd Street or 3rd Avenue, whatever it is. So it goes all the way up to 11th, and then you turn the corner, and then you've got another, I don't know what, 2-3 blocks or whatever.
Yeah.
So we were about halfway through. I don't know. I was probably like 7th or 8th or maybe 6th or something like that. And you sent the picture that you guys had made it in. That was my accountability piece. I was like, you know what? Had he not sent that picture, and had I not been out there with my wife, I'd have gone home, dude. I'm like, screw this crap. I'm done. It's cold. This sucks. And then we turned the corner, and then lo and behold, you guys nugged it out with Gen Pop. We actually did find the expedited line, which was in a different place than the instructions. Yep. And then once we went there, they're like, oh yeah, come on up. Here's your wristband.
Yeah.
Dude, my wife was like,
we had the same thing. We had the expedited thing, but by the time, when we went to where they said it was going to be, there was nothing there.
Yeah.
There was nothing there. It wasn't even close to there. And so it was like, okay, well, do we keep looking for it? In the meantime, the Gen Pop line is filling up. Like it's filling up like half a block every couple of minutes. It's a half a block. Oh, you waited 2 more minutes? Well, guess what? It's another half a block that you're going to wait. So it was like, hey man, if we're going to do this, we're here. We're just going to nug it out in Gen Pop, because we felt pretty good about it, because we got into the Gen Pop line and it was at 10th Street. So it's like, okay, we felt good about it. So, and granted, what Roger did not tell y'all, that Roger was not there just to go to the victory rally, because Roger's got some highfalutin friends who got him some tickets to the balls. And that's what I want to hear about, Roger. I want to hear about the 2 inaugural balls you got to go to.
Well, I can tell you who didn't fit in. I remember standing in line, dude, and this lady comes up to me and my wife, and she's like, so I forget how she worded it, but essentially like, who are you? Right. And why are you here? And Summer said something that's very vague. And she's like, well, such and such is my husband, and he's a senator. It's like, yeah, so that's not us. But the dude, the balls, it was a great time. Once in a lifetime experience. It's awesome whenever you get a chance to get dressed up. Of course, my wife loved the ball gown shopping and all that stuff. And, I went up to, like, Alan West was out there, Chip Roy, Ratcliffe was out there. So there was some, Waka Flocka Flame was out there. So that was, we had a little bit of everybody, right? But
Waka Flocka.
It's, it was entertaining. You run into a lot of folks. The challenge is, or I shouldn't say challenge, but what's tough about it for me is like I don't know any of these people. The guy I was with, he's pretty well known. I mean, he knows a lot of people, and he's probably got a much better social skills than what I have. But it's like I don't know any of these folks. So it's like, hey, I obviously talked to my wife. I talked with the guy, one of our listeners who brought us out there. But it's not like I'm running into people like, hey, man, good to see you again or whatever. And to top it off, it's like you can't get totally trashed, because I don't want to get completely, because it's free booze, right? So I'm like, I can't get hammered at this thing.
So it's not that you can't.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah. I don't want to be that guy. It's like, hey, I've had enough incidents in my life, some within the last year or so, where you drink a little too much in the wrong company, and it's like, and I'm like, hey, I do not need to be that guy here, because especially all three of us, very, very opinionated. You're around a bunch of people spending your tax dollars, and you start to tell people exactly what you think of them at that point. So I was not going to be that guy at that event. So it was. It was incredible. I mean, again, once in a lifetime event. It was awesome to see the folks out there. But again, a little tough just because, I don't know those folks in a social setting. Of course, I will say this though, my outlook is a lot different. So when I was many, many moons ago, when my wife was a lobbyist, she worked for a guy who is currently in a state office. And he got us tickets to the Republican Club or whatever. And, we got in the elevator and we, Senator McCain was there at the time, and there were a couple other folks. And I was enamored. I was young Republican and, conservative. And I'm seeing, McCain and a couple other folks. I'm like, wow, man. At this point, it was cool seeing these folks, but man, there was quite a bit of anger. Like, and I know we're going to get into some of this stuff, but, the whole, like, just being enamored with the people that you're around and the folks that you see on TV and Fox News. Yeah, that was when I was 25 or 26. Now that I'm 49, I'm like, okay, so I just paid X amount of dollars in taxes. Why are we sending this or spending this, this way or that way? I'm more concerned with, our situation, our status as a country, our rights, and our taxes more than anything. And not that I'm blaming any one of them specifically, but it is a very, very different perspective versus, being 25, 26 years old, meeting those folks.
Well, it's like they say, I can't speak to Roger's experience, but maybe he'd agree with me, maybe not. That old saying, I think it was George Carlin that said it, it's a big club and you ain't in it. And one of the things, just like we get in a room with a bunch of vets, right? It doesn't even have to be veterans, just with a bunch of people. We can sniff out the dude who is probably a tier 1 or a tier 1 support, support, or even an SF dude, or a SEAL or something. Sure. You can spot that dude. I believe it's the same thing in those events you were going to, Roger, where dude, they can smell their own. And if, it's not a secret handshake, but as you walk up to them, not to denigrate you, as you walk up to them, hey, meet my friend or whatever, they know you're not in the club, dude.
Well, they knew right then when one guy, he asked me, he's like, does that say Men's Warehouse on the side of your tux? So like, yeah, I don't own this, dude. So if you could not stain it, I have to return it tomorrow. That'd be great.
Whatever. It's like the, so it's like the, it's like the mob, right? Roger's buddy was probably introducing him like, it's a friend of mine, right? Versus not a friend of ours.
Dude, that totally happened at one spot, because we were sitting there talking to somebody, and his family, he ran into somebody that knew his family back when they were kids. And dude, I'm just standing there, and he's doing his best to try to integrate me into the conversation or whatever. And they're talking, and they're there for like, it's like 5-6 minutes. And this was the second one. So it was a cozier setting. So maybe 150, 200 people, something like that. So just kind of standing there, and I'm just like, okay. And I kind of like inch over a little bit just so I'm not like so awkward or whatever. And he's like, oh yeah. And this is my partner, Roger.
My partner. I love it.
What the first thing that came to my mind was, well, not gay partner, but then I didn't want to say that then, but obviously not that way, but it was just like, they just kind of looked at me, and it was like, all right, nice to meet you. So anyway, blah, 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 so yeah, it was, definitely, dude. They can smell their own, they know.
You should have let in with, hey, yeah, by the way, my name's Roger, and I have this idea. What you do is you take a plate, you take a leak in it, and then you freeze it. right? And then wait, you should have let it in with that, right?
This. All right.
Tell that
I
story.
forget I forget the context of this, but I was man, I was reading something on Reddit and somebody was like pissed at their neighbor, like angry at their neighbor in an apartment complex. And you know, folks have been on Reddit, you know how it is, man. They get on there and they rant and they rave. It's like 19 paragraphs long or whatever. And there was one response, and it was piss disc. Completely hijacked the thread, right? You talk about being ratioed. Completely hijacked the post. So then somebody's like, piss disc, what's that? And then a bunch of people just started dogpiling. It's like, you don't know piss disc. And finally one guy's like, you got to Google it. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go Google this thing. So apparently what you do is you take a plate, you piss on it, piss in it. So you have a puddle of piss. You throw it in the freezer, you freeze it. And I'm assuming you probably do it with like one of those, the wax coated paper plates or something like that, right? But once you freeze it, you pop it off and you throw it underneath their door because it'll melt. And when it melts, there'll be a pile of piss they walk into.
And Roger just texts us out of the blue. We're like, what?
I forget what I was doing. I think it was early in the morning too. So it was like one of the first things I read that day. I was like, what is happening? Like, what is going on right now?
I am so doing that.
I didn't go down the road of a wax coated paper plate.
Well, no, dude, I'm going to execution, right? I'm telling you that right now. I'm going to execution. So I had to think, I'm like, well, I can't do it to one of my plates. You know, that's my plate. One, Summer, she'll get pissed off at me, and you know, literally. So I can't do that. So then I'm like, well, you can't do it to a Cheapo Depot paper plate because it'll just get soggy, and then I'll have piss in my freezer. How am I going to explain that to my kids?
But how are you going to get it under the door? Because the jam's going to have to be, you know, there's going to have to be.
Well, you don't piss a gallon. You do like, you know, a quarter inch or whatever.
But there's got to be a little space there. That might work at a hotel, an older hotel.
Do you know how good this would have went over with Alan West or Chip Roy? This would have been great.
Ronnie Jackson.
Yeah, exactly. How many C3? Dude, they would have been begging you for C3 swag after that. They would have been like,
oh, yeah.
You got some
C3 I'm
sticker?
sure
Absolutely.
I would not have made it to the second event if I'd have led with that one on the first.
I'm trying to think of a politician who I am confident would receive that well.
Marcus Luttrell.
Maybe.
JD Vance.
Mullins.
JD Vance would love it.
JD Vance. Mullins.
Hegseth would love it.
Oh, yeah.
Mark Wayne Mullen. Yeah, he might dig it. You'd have to give it to him the right way, though. You know, you'd have to deliver that the right way.
Yeah.
There are a few
there's
out
some
there.
Yeah, there's some guys who would appreciate it.
You don't think Millie would like that? You don't think he would have liked that intro, that segue?
I doubt Millie knows that piss would even freeze. That guy is a moron.
Well, I guess it would depend on how much alcohol you got in your piss, right?
Ooh, that's a good point.
I don't know. No. Anyway.
Make sure you're sober when you do it, just to make sure.
Well, yeah, so that kind of derailed the inauguration talk.
It goes right into his first 100 days. So, Luke, what do you think so far? We're January 27th, so we're a week into this thing now. Man, a week ago we were freezing our nuts off, Josh, standing in that line.
Yeah,
crazy.
Geez.
So, what do you think? 7
days,
weekend, man.
I'll kind of, piggyback with a nice little segue from the inauguration thing. Unfortunately, I had to watch it from home. I had planned to attend. I was there. I paid for an Airbnb.
So I'm going to add piss disc to the keywords of this episode. Do you think that's going to lead to any views?
Oh, I think that's a really good idea. Actually,
all right.
Do it. Anyway, I was there. You know, it's all good. And then I get a call from my wife on Friday night. I fell down the stairs. She fell down. I'm laughing about it because she's fine. She's going to be fine. She fell down like 7 stairs, man. She just missed her footing and fell all the way down. She calls me from the basement just in agony. It's like, what do I do? I was like, call the neighbors. I can't call the neighbors. This is embarrassing. I'm like, oh, geez. So going back to the accountability thing and why I had to come home. Another aspect of accountability is she tore all the tendons in her left ankle. So she was able to drag herself to the car, get in it, and drive herself to the emergency room, because there's that element of pride there. And she's like, I can do this. So she did. But I'm telling her, and she's like, no, you need to stay. And I was like, I can't stay. You're injured. I can't, if I can get back, I can at least help you hobble around the house. And she's like, no, I'm just going to be pissed off at you for no reason because I'm in pain. So I had a conversation with Josh and Chris. It's like, guys, I have to go home. She's saying, and the reason we all agreed, it's like, I can't be that guy whose wife went to the emergency room, even if she demands I don't come back. I got Josh and Chris looking at me like, what kind of husband are you? I mean, in the back of their mind, they wouldn't say that to me, but in the back of their mind, it's like, well, I'd be back with my wife. So it's like, I would have gone back anyway, but having that extra level of accountability. But either way, I'm watching it. To your question, I'm watching it on the TV, nice and warm, after having slept in that day, not having to get. So I'm watching on TV, and it gets to, a lot of things to talk about the actual inauguration itself, but we're talking about the 100 days of the inauguration. Was impressive. I thought it went over pretty well, and I could see these things moving indoors. I'm not going to say permanently, but I could see a lot more of this being done. But his speech, talk about the first 100 days. I don't know what I was expecting with his speech, because I know we've all agreed that this is Trump 2.0. This isn't the Trump that was elected in 2016. This is a different Trump. So I kind of expected him, and I know y'all watched it on the big screen, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm watching that, and I guess I was expecting him to be a little more reach across the aisle. I think I was expecting that, maybe. But man, when he started going off, I was like, oh God, yeah, no, this is going to be different. And that's where it started. It's only been 8 days, but that's where it started. I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to look a lot different, and I think some of the problems that Josh and I kind of had with Trump, more so Josh and me, but I did have these problems, was, man, he just made a lot of mistakes. Well, I think what showed from that speech to start is he's learned from his mistakes. So if you're going to make a speech like that and insult basically the outgoing president, the president before him, and before him, it's like, you better have your ducks in a row. And that's what my initial thought. And man, he didn't disappoint. You guys actually got to see him sign executive orders right in front of you. I look at this stuff and I'm having that reaction, Roger and Josh, some of the stuff that's going on, and I know we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about this a lot, so I don't have to spew out my guts right here. But I'm almost like, when he'll sign something or say something or do something, part of me goes, ew, because I'm remembering that 2018 Trump, right? I'm like, oh God, too much, maybe just ease into that a little bit. But I think he has a plan. I think he's learned from his first 4 years, and man, he's just been successful so far. But again, a lot of things I'm like, oh gosh, I love what I'm hearing, but here's the thing. I love what I'm hearing, and I'm waiting for, after he says some of these things, this media backlash that we experienced from 2017 to 2020, 2021. But he's not getting that kind of backlash. It doesn't seem like he's getting a lot of pushback. There's a ceremonial pushback in the Senate confirming the candidate, ceremonial, but he's pretty much getting everything he wants so far. But there's a lot more to talk about, Josh. So kick it to you. First 8 days. What do you think?
So when he gave that speech, I was like, this is not a conciliatory speech. Like, this is not a unification speech at all. And I loved it. I loved every single word of it. Dude, when he threw Manifest Destiny out, I was like, dude, this is amazing. I genuinely thought it was the best speech by a president since Reagan's A Time for Choosing. And it is that good. It was so fantastic. to your point about, Trump 2.0 in the executive orders. So one example of how this is a new Trump. So you go back and you look at Trump's EO on regulatory freeze pending review. All right, he signed one almost identical in 2017, but this one has a few changes to it, which sets him up for so much more success. So the order he signed includes not just rules and regulatory actions, but also includes guidance documents, which agencies use to circumvent the rulemaking process. In 2017, that EO did not prohibit it, did not address those guidance documents, which agencies used to continue establishing regulations and rules, because it was outside the scope of that executive order. It's not outside the scope of this one. He included it this time. It includes consideration for public comment period, which was not a feature in 2017. This order this time also gives the Office of Management Budget Director, who's currently Russ Vought, is the anointed one. The Senate's still working to confirm him last I checked. Gives him the authority to review info collections under the Paperwork Reduction Act, which was not included in the first order. So it gives him a lot more authority. And it also allows the president to modify or extend the memorandum if actions before the inauguration date frustrate its purpose, which was not included in the 2017 one. So a lot of the actions that they took prior to, Trump inaugurating the inauguration in 2017, that EO didn't address those. And so, he hit a lot of roadblocks. This executive order specifically addressed some of those things that they put in, that the Biden administration tried to put in place under Office of Management and Budget, to frustrate the incoming administration. So that right there, just that one executive order shows like they learned a lot, and they're here to play ball. There's a lot of other things. I have a lot to say on birthright citizenship, but yeah, Roger, how was the speech and the first 8 days for you?
I'm same as you guys. I mean, one, you got to look at everything he's gone through, even through his last presidency, right? All the way back to 2016, the election, 2017. So I mean, he's been dealing with this stuff for the last 7 years, 8 years, and so I think there's a lot of relief there, and there's a lot of, hey man, he was done wrong. He was done dirty. Whether you like him, love him, hate him, whatever the case is, he was done wrong. I would tell you what, the best way to sum this thing up for him is the Joe Rogan episode. And we've talked a little bit about this before, but go back and you don't have to listen to the whole thing. You can listen to like the first 10 minutes, and Joe Rogan's kind of getting to okay, man, you're inaugurated, you put your hand on the Bible, da, 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 da. He's like, and then what? And the way Trump says it, and, and we're not talking about the travel, you obviously walk in the White House, what do you do next? But he's like, I'm not a politician, well, at least at that time, right? He wasn't a politician. So he's like, I don't know what's next. And next thing you know, you've got your chief of staff and like, hey, by the way, sir, Mr. President, you've got 250 appointees that you've got to make like now. And he's like, well, I don't know. So you're fishing out of this pond that the swamp drove you to. And so it's the same fish that everybody else has been recycling through or been fishing for over the last several decades. And, he admits to some bad picks. We've talked about it. Josh been a lot more vocal about it with some of his hires than others. But I think, at the time, not that he didn't have the connections, but he didn't have the networking at the time to really bring in the folks that were going to push the agenda that he wanted. And at the same time, you kind of like, yeah, you're the president, but you don't really know what you can and can't do. So I think he addresses that on the Joe Rogan episode to where, okay, now he knows who he wants. He's coming in. I would say that, as soon as he decided to run, he's got his list going right now. That list changes all the time. You can add people and you can remove it or whatever, but he's already making that list. These are the people that I want based on loyalty. I think number one, right? Loyalty to him and his agenda. And then I think he likes folks that are a little bit fiery, man. They're feisty. They fight back. You look at JD Vance with his, I don't care, Margaret, it's classic. That right there sums up the Trump administration. So I think going back to what Josh and Luke both said, he learned a lot in the first administration. You kind of get down that road and you're like, man, I just got to try to stop the bleeding and piece this thing. And then, COVID broke out. And so everything changed. This one here, he had an agenda. He knew what he wanted. He knew the folks that he wanted in. I won't go too far down the confirmations. I know we'll talk about a little bit of this later, but I think the biggest one, well, two of them, right? Hegseth and Noam, both confirmed. Those were going to be two challenges. I think his next, he's got RFK, which word is that he's going to get nominated. And then you got Tulsi Gabbard. He gets through both of those, everybody will be nominated, right? But what I really liked was, and I'm so glad we got to be there to see that, myself and Josh, when he was signing the executive orders at the Capital One Arena. And it's, man, he was straight and to the point. And kind of like going back to what Josh was just saying, he's straight to the point. There's a purpose behind it. And I loved when he was signing them in the Capital One Arena, he was giving, a good 20, 30 seconds of context behind it.
Yeah.
Right. This is why I'm doing this. And when you look at that stuff and people say MAGA, it goes back to, I hate MAGA. Well, what part about making America great again do you hate? And so when you look at these executive orders, you're like, what part of this do you hate? I mean, you look at, like his immigration, right? Basically froze the border, closed that bad boy down. And then they saw videos of the people on the other side of the border crying. Well, here's the thing. If you didn't come over before Trump was elected or before he was inaugurated, that's on you. You're dumb. We've said this, or at least I've said this from the beginning. I don't blame illegals for being here. Don't blame them one bit, because you know what? If I was in the same situation, I'm coming across the Rio Grande as well if I know how to swim. If I'm looking for a better way of life and looking, for my kids and the family, I'm doing it. I don't blame them for being here. Okay. I blame our government for having a policy that's going to allow the right folks in and not kicking out the folks that did it the wrong way. That's the problem. Right. So when you look at what he did with immigration, just off the bat, it's like, hey, man, you got to stop the flow. You got to stop the hemorrhaging. And even to this day, and I think, Luke, you've alluded to this several times, when you look at a lot of the folks that are coming in, let's not even look at the national security implications of this. Okay, just look at your Latin Americans, your Mexicans, South Americans, or whatever. I mean, a lot of those folks, when you look at their core value and principles, they do not align with Democrats. So I don't know if the plan by them, and you can touch on this. I don't know if the plan is, hey, they'll never be able to vote, but those family members that are housing them and bringing them in, now we've converted them to be Democrats or whatever. But if those folks ever gain citizenship, I mean, generally speaking, I know it's anecdotal, but especially with a lot of them being Catholics, they don't align with the Democrat values, at least not the ones that we've seen in the last 8 years, 12 years.
Yeah. A lot to say on this, and we're going to transition into something else where Josh and Roger will probably go back and forth quite a bit. I'm really looking forward to that because I have a couple of things to say on it. But first of all, there aren't a lot of Mexicans coming illegally, or there are not a lot of Mexicans coming over claiming asylum. The majority of Mexicans coming over these days are genuinely smugglers who are going to go back for another load. The percentage of Mexicans, like known gotaways, is actually, or known gotaways, the estimates on the known gotaways for actual Mexicans is actually really low. It's the rest of Central America and South America that's coming in. Not all South America, but Colombia, Venezuela, so on and so forth. So y'all know where I live. I live in Texas, obviously, and you may know what I did before, may not, but you're down on the street dealing with a lot of illegals, people who are here illegally. And so I kind of know how they think. I got a lot of friends who are here, not friends, but acquaintances who are here illegally, and they've been here for a very long time, right? So there are a lot of people afraid out there, Josh. I didn't mean to say Josh because I got a little bit to say. But there are a lot of folks out there that are really scared right now. People who have been here for 20 years, working in the same restaurant, whatever, they're very afraid that, holy crap, Trump's coming after me. People who have lived here are not felons, have never broken the law, have had steady jobs, so on and so forth. Been here for 20 years, over 20 years. And now they're petrified. And what I have to explain to some of these people is, boy, this is really important. I've said this on the podcast a few times, and people just don't get it. There's a lot of bluster, and I'll say it, it's bluster. There's a lot of wall-to-wall media about Trump deporting all illegals, right? I mean, Fox News is right up embedded in the ICE teams, raiding the Denver and Chicago and taking out known felons and putting them on flights back, to wherever they came from. There's a reason that's happening. The reason they're doing that, this is all calculated. It's for, of course, to get the bad guys out of here. Of course, that's a tactical reason. The strategic reason this is wall-to-wall coverage, is to eliminate what's called a pull factor. When people know, like Roger said, man, if I was living in Guatemala and I knew I could get across and I knew I could get these benefits, I knew that I could bring other people over too, of course I'm going to do it with no kind of repercussions, nothing. It looks like it's just a free-for-all. Well, hell yeah, spread the word. Let's all go, right? Now, if you get this perceived crackdown, no, everybody's going. Like Tom Homan, man. Like that guy, I love him, but the dude, like, he's over the top, and he's over the top for a reason. We're deporting everybody, even people who are here who haven't committed any crimes. We're deporting all of them. Now, if you look at it logistically and scaling it out, that's not possible. You know how long that would take with the current ICE resources we have? You could even put the military up against it. You know how long it would take to deport basically 30 million people. It's just, dude, it's not going to happen. But the purpose they're doing, the reason they're doing it is for the purpose of creating this thought in people's minds. We're not going to chance it. We're just going to stay until the next administration. That slows the flow, and that slows the flow significantly because this is a social media phenomenon. People coming across the border, it's all this information is exchanged off social media. And I can tell you right now, eliminating that pull factor, like what's going to pull them into the United States, I would say a lot of people have quit their plans of trying to come across because now the party's over. Like Roger said, man, I hate it for you if you showed up on Monday, the day of inauguration, and you couldn't make your appointment. Number one, you didn't move fast enough, but number two, you're stupid because there wasn't going to be a hearing that day anyway because all government offices were closed on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So, Josh, I do not share. I don't. This is like the illegal immigration thing is a complex issue. It's not purely black and white. I can name you a few examples of people who snuck in back in the early 2000s or in the 90s who have lived here and they remain illegal. The only crime they did was sneak into the country. I would have them as my next door neighbor. You know, I'm not for blanket amnesty, but man, I mean, I believe there's some people who've kind of proven their worth. You know, they haven't gone back to Mexico, that's for sure. And all of them are Mexican, by the way, except to one Thai lady. And it's like my heart kind of goes out to that. It's like, yeah, you know, you've proven yourself that you could be a citizen. You know, can you take the test? You know, can you pass the test? You know, the written test and put up your right hand. I'm all for that. I'd say that's a small portion of who we're talking about right now. But, you know, what I say, what about those people, right, who have quasi-proven themselves? But also, what about the birthright citizenship thing? You know, we're not talking about diplomats, whatever. Somebody who snuck in, you know, had a kid or even got amnesty and had a kid. And now that kid, by the 14th Amendment, the current reading of it, that child is a U.S. citizen. Right. So give me your thoughts on some of that, what I just said. I know you're going to call me a big softy and everything, but I mean, there are some good folks out there.
No, I don't disagree that there are good folks out there. You know, and like you said, it's not 100% black and white. I think for those who, like you said, have been here for a very long time, productive members of society, there still has to be a repercussion, right, for breaking the law. And this has been something that's, been said multiple times. Hey, you got to pay a fine, you got to take the test, you got to go through, this, that, and the other, and then, now you're in the club. But like you said, I think that's probably not a fair assessment of the majority of illegal aliens in the country. And so as far as that goes, I have zero, like, round them all up, and I agree with what Roger said, man. If I lived in some desperate shithole third world, Latin American country, and I had, it's like, hey man, I can make it to the US, I can get a job, and then I can send remittances back to my family, to make sure that they have at least some standard of living, then I'm going to do that, right? Because I'll do whatever it needs. I will do whatever I need to do to take care of my family because that's my job. That's my responsibility. All right. And if that gets to the point where I've got to break some other country's laws to do it, well, so be it. Now, but I also have to be willing to accept the consequences if I get caught. And that's just how it is. Um, but as far as birthright citizenship, so the one of the executive orders that Trump signed, knowing that it was going to go to the Supreme Court, knowing that it was gonna, there was gonna be an injunction, that followed it soon afterwards. It's gonna wind up at the Supreme Court, was ending birthright citizenship for illegal aliens. All right. So I've got a lot to say on it. I've got a lot of notes. I'm gonna go through them, and then that'll provide stuff for you guys to chime in on. So everybody knows the 14th Amendment covers this under the citizenship clause. All right. So there's been a couple of landmark cases that people are going. If you're not familiar with them, you're going to become very familiar with them very, very soon. Elk v. Wilkins, United States v. Wong Kim Ark, and Plyler v. Doe. All right, those are the cases that you're going to become very familiar with. So the one that people keep talking about, saying, no, the Supreme Court's already said that anybody, born in the United States is a United States citizen, regardless if they're here legally or not. They keep referencing the United States v. Wong Kim Ark. Okay. So SCOTUS held, and this case was in the late 1800s, that, quote, a child born in the United States of parents of Chinese descent who at the time of his birth are subjects of the Emperor of China, but have a permanent domicile residence in the United States and are there carrying out business and are not employed in any diplomatic or official capacity under the Emperor of China, automatically became a U.S. citizen at birth. All right. And that's what everybody keeps referencing. All right. So there's a few issues with that we'll get to in a minute. So birthright citizenship, or also called just solely right of soil, has never been seriously challenged by SCOTUS since that case. Courts have simply accepted U.S. Wong Kim Ark as dogma and completely ignore Elk v. Wilkins, which was a case prior to that one. All right. So in 2010, they reviewed it. The history of this citizen clause notes that Wong Kim Ark decision applies to children of foreigners present on American soil, but has not been revisited or re-examined since the concept of illegal alien entered our lexicon. So illegal aliens, that was not a thing. It was not an issue when that court case was decided, nor was it an issue when Elk v. Wilkins was decided. You also have Plyler v. Doe from the early 1980s. SCOTUS struck down, this is, in your state, Luke, SCOTUS struck down a Texas state statute denying funding for children of illegal aliens in a school district who was going to charge a tuition fee to compensate for that lost funding. What's interesting and why this case will have some play in a probably future case is the Chief Justice at the time, I think it was Rehnquist, was the Chief Justice in the early 80s, if I remember correctly, asserted that issues of whether to admit children illegal aliens should be delegated to Congress rather than the judiciary, as it is more a policy issue than a constitutional one. All right, which is interesting because Greg Abbott came back and said he was actually going to look at revisiting that. All right, so Berger further argued that the Equal Protection Clause does not mandate identical treatment of different categories of persons, and that Texas did have a legitimate reason to distinguish between those here legally and illegally. One last note on Plyler v. Doe. Greg Abbott expressed intent in overturning Plyler v. Doe after Alito's opinion on Dobbs was leaked. Abbott's stance was there is no constitutional right to education for immigrants. It is only established in that one case, Plyler v. Doe. And so Abbott looked at that as he can shoehorn immigrants out of schools, and then that's one less reason for you to bring, for you to come. Why I think the people using the Kim Wong Ark case is a fool's errand. His parents were here legally. Immigration wasn't a thing in 1897. All right. There was no authorized port of entry. You showed up on a boat and got off, were medically screened, and sit, on your merry way. Congress themselves didn't believe in the case as they passed the Indian Citizenship Act in 1924. If Congress believed the citizenship clause automatically confers citizenship, there would have been no reason to pass that act, right? The Citizenship Clause of the 14th Amendment states all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. All right, so the first problem in this is redundancy. If, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof simply means, as common parlance accepts, that one is subject to the law because of the physical presence in the territory, that clause is redundant. Quote, born in the United States covers that base. And if you go back and you look in, judicial cases, an interpretation of legal text that creates a redundancy is usually disfavored and ignored. The other piece is, quote, subject to the jurisdiction thereof should be interpreted to mean owning sole allegiance to the United States. This is confirmed by one of the primary drafters of the clause, who was then Senator Lyman Trumbull, who stated, quote, subject to the jurisdiction meant subject to complete jurisdiction, which meant, quote, not owing allegiance to anybody else. Initially, and of course, this comes with precedent, and precedent is one of those things that's considered in cases. SCOTUS agreed, although dicta, which means there's a side remark in a judicial opinion. I had to look that up because I didn't know that. Both the majority and the dissent in the slaughterhouse cases agreed that the 14th Amendment, subject to the jurisdiction clause, excluded the children of citizens and subjects of foreign states who just happen to be born in the United States. SCOTUS confirmed this understanding in Elk v. Wilkins when it denied birthright citizenship to a Native American born on a reservation who claimed citizenship as an adult. The court held that the claims of birthright required him not to be, quote, subject in some respect or degree to the jurisdiction of the United States, but completely subject to their political jurisdiction and owing them direct and immediate allegiance. And that is one of the big things that Wong Kim Mark reversed. So the big thing, there's a lot to dissect here, and it's a lot of jargon and a lot of legalese, but the other thing that people got to stop doing is citing precedents as a reason to keep a badly decided Supreme Court case. All right, we understood this with Roe v. Wade. People were like, well, it's been the law of the land for, decades. It's like, okay, well, Plessy v. Ferguson was the law of the land for decades. Do you think we should have left that in place and should have kept segregation? Or do you agree with Brown v. Board of Education? I think it was right to overturn Plessy. And, I don't think this is going to get overturned at the Supreme Court. What I think is going to happen is I think the Supreme Court's going to go through. I think they're going to change the way some of what it means, but I don't see them overturning outright birthright citizenship, saying no, you got to be here legally, to be a U.S. citizen. If you're born here, your parents have to be here legal, whatever. But I think there's going to be there's going to be some decisions in that case that are going to, help. I don't know, kind of help us move down the road in with a little bit clearer optic. But what we have right now is not tenable. You can't just show up, pop out a kid, and they get to be a U.S. citizen. We can't keep operating like that.
Well, you could. The problem was when you look at years ago, when you're talking about 1, 2, 3 million people, and total illegals or whatever that are coming over, and you're talking about a handful of kids that are born here. It's still a problem, but it's not big enough. It's not on the scale that becomes, an issue nationally, right? Now, when you've got 25, 30 million people here, if not more, it's a much bigger problem. And Josh, you hit it spot on. What I'm interested in is, and I know we've listened to a couple of them, especially the Roe v. Wade one. I want to hear the technicality that the Supreme Court, how they interpret it, because there's plenty of, you talk about just precedents in general, like even going back to how it's scripted. There's plenty of dialogue back then on what they meant, and you laid out very well. The other piece is a lot of times it's like Roe v. Wade. You just grew up with that. Like, and I'm as guilty of it as everybody else. We just grew up. Hey, man, you were born in the U.S. and that's just you're a U.S. citizen. Okay. And so we never go back and actually do the due diligence on our own. And then you read, hey, this is why the founding fathers or people after them. This is why they created these amendments. These why these laws were created, what have you. And so when you look at the 14th Amendment, because it was in response to Dred Scott versus Sanford, right? So
Yep.
you're looking at after the war, after the Civil War, and the argument of are slaves or former slaves and their descendants, are they U.S. citizens? And anyway, Dred Scott versus Sanford basically ruled no, they're not. Okay, and then many years later, the 14th Amendment came out and obviously overturned that. What's interesting is going back to what Josh said. It's that second part, right? It's the all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And I think that's what, in my opinion, what SCOTUS is going to hone in on, because there's a lot of definitions out there. But when you go back to what I think it was Trumbull that initially, when he wrote it, was talking about foreign allegiance, but there was another piece to that as well: political representation. And that's what's going to be very, very interesting, because you look at, okay, I can absolutely see the foreign allegiance and this and that, got that tracking. If that's interpreted also as or political representation, does that baby, once they're born to the illegals, whatever, does that individual automatically have political representation in the state, district, whatever that they live in? And I think even when you look at the census and how that's counted, even with illegal immigrants, it's going to be interesting. I don't know which way they're going to rule in this, because I'm like Josh. I read this stuff. It's pretty straightforward to me, how this was written, why it was written, the definitions of a lot of it. But I think when you start to parse hairs and you say, okay, subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Okay, well, you know what? We can't make the argument. You do have foreign allegiance, but once that child is born on U.S. soil, do they not automatically have political representation? And then you can even throw that, a stretch farther where you say, okay, well, now you actually do, because you're counted as part of the census. Oh, by the way, and that's how the House and their 435 members, right? So, boy, and coming down to maybe Luke can parse through this stuff. I think there's probably 75-80% of the law precedents, the reason why it was written that says, hey, no, you don't have that. I mean, because we do have exclusions, right? Diplomats and things like that, just for that reason. That's there. And I think that's going to come into play as well, because I think you take 100%. The same reasons for that, right? And you have to apply that to this. But I do think there are two or three threads there that say, well, okay, using that standard, well, you do have political representation. Now, the illegal parents don't, but the minute you're born here, you do. I don't know if that's enough to, end it, keep it. I don't know, but I'm very, very curious to see let me rephrase this. I'm very, very curious to see how the quote unquote conservatives on the Supreme Court, what they look at, because KBJ and Sotomayor, they're morons. So they're going to talk about something that's completely irrelevant.
So I will follow this one pretty close, because this is kind of a groundbreaking case. It will be when it's tried, because first of all, you guys know what I think. I don't think this is about eliminating birthright citizenship. This is about eliminating a pull factor, period. So maybe everybody get what they want, but I waffle back and forth. Josh and I's thinking, sometimes I think Josh is too much of a realist. Sometimes I think I'm too much of a realist, and Josh thinks no compromise. Sometimes I think there should be some, and then we waffle back and forth on that. But I do believe, going back to this being a groundbreaking case, they're going to have to there is no precedent for some of this stuff, right? Because here's the thing. It's like, here's what I think, Josh. This is what I was saying with my baby horse standing up for the first time diatribe about the difference between me and you, is that personally, I don't believe it should be rescinded, right? But that's a big picture view. The reason I think I don't believe it should be rescinded, is because I think the law was written with good intentions, right? Those intentions have been completely skewed, because we weren't dealing with a crisis like we're dealing with now. Where the pull factor is, if I can just sneak across the border, drop a kid, that's called an anchor baby, and it brings people in. That was never the intent of that law. So it's up to the Supreme Court to establish a new precedent. and for Congress to start writing laws and for the executive to start enforcing them. Then, we get back, like, I agree with you. What you're saying is like, if this continues the way it is, it's not sustainable. The question is, therefore, should it go away? I don't know. I don't know. I'd like to see it be a perfect world, but it ain't. So we'll see how this goes. I think if I had to put all my money on it, it stands, right? It stands. But like I said, there needs to be a precedent set and laws written, because the way I look at, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is, let's say you have a couple people that come over here from wherever, you name the country, from Mali or something, and they are on their way. They've done it the right way. They didn't sneak across the border. They stood in line at the consulate, and they got their visa to come over and work or do whatever. Now they have a green card. And I don't know what that process is. It's husband and wife. They have a green card. They're doing, mid-skill labor, and their intent is to stay and play citizenship. Now, there are a lot of rules that you've got to abide by while you've got your green card and waiting for citizenship. First of all, you can't leave the United States. Otherwise, it's revoked. It's like, okay, we found out you went to Canada. You're done. There's no citizenship for you. You broke the rules. Oh, you got a DUI? You're done. You broke the rules. Now, I don't have a problem with those people who have all intent to stay, who are contributing to the economy. I consider that subject to the jurisdiction thereof. Okay, you're playing by our rules for now. Let's see if you could do it for 7 years. Well, you have earned that right. Now, if those two people have a baby in the meantime, I don't have a problem with that kid having citizenship. But at the same time, if they break the laws, well, that's lack of family care plan. I don't know how you're going to leave your kid here, but you got to go home. And we'll see how this plays out. Now, again, this is kind of a complex issue because there's exceptions to every rule, right? We're dealing with human beings here. But this is why I respect Trump and what he's doing, eliminating the pull factors, is sometimes you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, man. There's going to get people swept up in this who are good people, but wrong place, wrong time. So I don't know. I talked a lot there, Josh. What do you think?
No, I agree. I don't want to see birthright citizenship go away, but there's obviously a number of things have to happen. One, for people to do it the right way, that process has to be fixed. That process absolutely has to be fixed. If and like you say, that eliminates one of those pull factors. It should not take somebody, especially if it's somebody from a country, you can document who they are, you can vet them with relative, accuracy. It shouldn't take them 7 years to become a citizen. Like, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's like, it goes back to the abortion thing. It should not be easier to have an abortion than it is to adopt a kid, right? You take a look at how hard it is and how much money is spent to, adopt a child. Well, that's why people have aborted. It's so much easier just to do the wrong thing. But what I don't want to see is, let's say you're an H-1B, over here on a student visa, from China, you're going to Stanford, getting your bachelor's degree, and you decide, oh, well, while I'm here, you crank out a kid, and guess what? Now you got that anchor baby, right? And you take a look at China, Russia, Iran, and if I'm an adversary and I know that, hey man, I just got to push people over there on H-1Bs, and they can crank out a kid while they're there. Hey, we're going to pay for everything. China does this daily by the thousands at scale. All right, we're going to pay for everything for you. We're going to take care of your kid. We're going to make sure, Gam back here gets your B12 shot while you're over there. And you're going to go get a job at, this cleared defense contractor and, A, B, and C. And then all of a sudden, China has an aircraft carrier that looks a lot like ours. Right. And these, but now you got this student over here who they have a tie here because now they have a kid. Now, when you start looking, does that help China this year? Somebody cranks out a kid this year? Not necessarily, but when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the best time is now. In 18 years, guess what that kid can do? That kid can sponsor you to get your citizenship. right? And so when you start looking at this, long term over the horizon, decades, it is a great way to, you know, get inside your adversary's house. And
In
it's just
China, real quick, you brought up a good point, and this is what a lot of people don't realize. China has a different viewpoint of the Chinese people than we do as the American people, right? Or German or whatever. China, like if somebody leaves the United States, like all these celebrities said, and they renounce their citizenship, the way we see it is, well, you're just not American anymore. You're now German or Austrian or Swiss or whatever. You're not American. And we'd say that for white, black, brown, Asian, whatever, right? Chinese don't view it like that. The Chinese, the way they view it, and this isn't just the CCP, this is how the Chinese people view it. If you are of Chinese descent, you belong to us.
yes.
Now, you are a citizen of China. Well, you're not a citizen, but you belong to us. Your loyalties lie with us. That's how they view it. Now, someone of Chinese descent, somebody lives 2 doors down from you who's the fourth generation China, they don't believe that. But the Chinese do, the CCP do. And if they'll turn screws if they have to. I just want to point that out, that there's a big cultural difference between the Chinese, and I don't know if other Asian countries feel the same way, but China, I know, is very big on that. But that's something kind of foreign to Westerners. Foreign to Westerners.
I love
Well,
it.
and
I see what
that
you did there.
was put out in the FBI notice that the Chinese, and that's through collection, right? Or that's the reason for it. The Chinese government has now put out that hey, we're not just touching first generation Chinese, we're going second, third, fourth, folks that were born in the United States to their grandparents were Chinese, ethnic Chinese, right? Born back on the mainland or whatever, have nothing to do with China, full-blooded Americans, born in San Francisco, whatever, and they're being tapped, right? So let me ask you this, Luke and Josh, Luke and or Josh, and this was my point the other day. It was just too much to type, dude. So let's say again, and again, I don't know what basis or what grounds. I don't think the Supreme Court's going to just my gut tells me they're not going to get rid of birthright citizenship. If anything, they'll keep it the way it is. They'll throw it back to Congress, whatever. Oh, look at that live news there. Luke saying that there was an earthquake there. I thought you were just a little gassy, but so let's say that SCOTUS does overturn it, right? Or not necessarily overturn it, but they say, hey man, that if you're an illegal here and you pop out a kid, sorry, kid's not a U.S. citizen. This goes back to my point the other day. How do you enforce that? And the reason I say that, and this is why I brought up state birth certificates, because let's say you're here in Arizona, okay, guy, gal crosses the, the Rio Grande, they come through Nogales, they get into Arizona, the mother goes to the hospital, down in Tucson or Nogales or whatever, U.S. hospital, pops out a kid. There's going to be an Arizona birth certificate on there. Okay. So my question is, and I'm not trying to be argumentative about it, I'm just looking at enforcement. How does that get enforced then? You know what I'm saying? And that's why I brought up the states cover birth certificates or cut birth certificates. The federal government doesn't cut birth certificates. They don't do reports of birth abroad like I have one, but they come across into Arizona, any state, doesn't matter where, pop out a kid, they're going to be issued a birth certificate by the state. So then how does the federal government vet that and prove it? How do they enforce that?
So you have two birth certificates, right? Because the mom, let's just say the lady, the female, the woman who has that kid, she cannot produce paperwork showing that she is a U.S. citizen. Well, you get this birth certificate for your kid that states, yep, that kid is,
So
yes,
you would have to
on
have that
this
for
day,
everybody.
for everybody who has a kid, every illegal alien who has a kid.
Well, no, I mean, you'd have to do that for everybody that's born in for every birth, right?
He's saying there's two. There's one
There's
that's like,
two. You have one form that says your parents were U.S. Your mother,
That's what I'm
you were
saying. So
born to a
every
U.S.
parent
citizen.
that has
You're
a
a U.S.
kid
citizen.
would have to prove their citizenship, is what you're
yes.
saying.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
he's saying.
Yeah.
And that gets tricky. I see what you say, and I haven't delved into this because we went back and forth, and Roger was like, it's a states' rights thing because the birth certificate is like, I just really don't see it. And we kind of went back and forth, but I haven't delved into it since then because I just haven't had time or I didn't think about it. But I don't
And I get
know.
immigration
I
is a federal
but
issue. Like I get
yeah,
that, right?
but I don't know. You got a good point because I don't know where that keyhole is between the state issuing a birth certificate and that being some kind of federal proof of whatever. I don't know where that is. I haven't researched it. I know there's an answer out there, but you're right. It's like if there it's consideration. It's like Josh, if you have to have two, every state's got to agree to do the exact same procedure. And in my world, that's never going to freaking happen. That's never going to happen unless it's codified in federal law, which would come out of the Supreme Court, right?
Well, then it can be codified in federal law because it falls under immigration. So that's clearly the purview of the federal government.
So would you go along with the federal government then issuing a birth certificate? Because again, there's a disconnect between what the federal law is and yes, the state issuing a birth certificate. You know what I'm saying?
No, the federal government should be issuing birth certificates. The state should be issuing them. But it's a simple. It's I mean look.
Oh, I get you. If it's a
It's a
law,
simple
they have
fix.
to.
Yeah, it's a federal law. If Congress passes it, it says, hey, you have to have two birth certificates. One you'll provide to illegal aliens, right? And two you'll provide to U.S. citizens.
So how do and I'm questioning, not sharpshooting. How do the
Yeah, yeah.
parents prove that they're U.S. citizens? Is it the same type of system?
Another birth certificate.
Is it no? Well, is it the same kind of system where it's like you got to be verified within that DHS system or whatever it is, Department of Labor? Like you have to be a U.S. citizen to have this job. Y'all filled out those forms, right? I can't remember what
I
the
mean, the
form is
same way,
called.
the same way,
I-9.
this,
I-9. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you just got to submit
I
your
mean, the same
I-9 and
way,
you're
the
good.
same way you prove it now. Show up.
I mean,
Where's your Social Security? Where's your Social Security card? Here's my Social Security card. Here's my passport. There you go.
that
Well,
sounds
that's the
like about
problem is because right now, like in Arizona, to get your driver's license to vote, it's the birth certificate. So I'm not arguing with you. What I'm saying is there's a lapse there, and so there's going to have to be some grandfathering. So let's say you make the law right now, there's going to have to be some grandfathering of a generation, right, before
Oh,
that
for sure.
kicks in. So
Yeah, there'll have to be some grandfathering, and I mean, but I think this is not out of the realm of possible. I mean, we have Real ID, right? It's a thing, and that Real ID is verifying. Okay, yes, this is who you are, and you got. Now, I could be wrong. California could be an outlier. Massachusetts could be an outlier. But to get a Real ID, you have to be a U.S. citizen. If I'm if, if I'm correct, and again, I may be wrong on that, but I think to get a Real ID, you have to be a U.S. citizen. So here in the
if that
next,
happened,
within the next 5-10 years, everybody's going to have Real IDs because the old ones are just eventually going to phase themselves out as you go to, update and renew and stuff. So it shouldn't even take a generation to be able to get that, that in place.
so no, you do not have to be a U.S. citizen to get a real ID, but you do have to be legally present.
Dumb.
Obviously, not an illegal.
mm,
Um, You know what job's gonna be, and I'm not sharpshooting you at all. I mean, because that's what you got to
Yeah,
do. You
yeah.
just got to draw the
No, no.
law, right, and saying this is when it starts
Yeah.
or whatever. You know what job will pick up here in Arizona and probably Texas and New Mexico? Midwives,
oh,
guarantee it. Because we
Oh,
have a
yeah.
lot of those out here. I mean, I don't know a lot. I say a lot, I don't know, 5, 10%, whatever. But I remember being back in recruiting command, you would have a lot of folks that were delivered by midwives. And if you're delivered by a midwife, I mean, you don't even have a birth certificate. You go down to vital statistics and say, hey, such and such was born here. Here's the mom. They can be anybody. There's no proof, And again, I'm not trying to shoot holes to it. I just,
Yeah, yeah.
when I look at if the Supreme Court were to rule it that way, it's going to be tough to enforce, man. Like
well,
very, very, and it doesn't mean you don't do it. It's just very tough to enforce.
Well,
and
I think it comes back to that. I think it also comes back to, it is going to be tough to enforce, but it's like abortion, right? Okay, you're never going to get rid of all abortions because there's always going to be,
Sure.
those back rooms and stuff like that. But if we can get rid of, if there's 1 million abortions a year, if we can get rid of 800,000 of them, that's a massive win.
Well, and I think that with a closed border helps a lot, right? I mean, one, the
Yes.
closed border
Oh,
in itself
100%.
is going to eliminate a lot of those
well,
millions of
Yeah.
them,
Yeah.
millions of people coming across, not necessarily babies.
I,
Yeah. And talking about the closed border, real quick, Luke, and you have it. I just want to throw a couple numbers out here. This is insane. You know how many people CBP encountered yesterday on the United States Mexico border? Just under 600. just under 600 people in the Del Rio
Unreal.
sector. In the Del Rio sector, and Luke, you can speak to the busy sectors and stuff like that. It was approximately 60 people they encountered yesterday in Del Rio sector.
And that's just one sector. My understanding of the numbers Roger you sent out was it's gone down across the board. And just to give you some context, back when I was at the border, we were looking at anywhere from 8 to 14,000 a day, and that's across the border, right? So a day,
Good
and
Lord.
of those 8 to
Wow.
14,000, about 99% of them were getting amnestied into the country. That just kind of gives you an idea. So I'm glad you brought that up. I was trying to figure out where we're going to work that in, because you cranked out those numbers. But so yeah, I think there was an earthquake here, because while Josh was talking, I'm looking at my whiskey glass here. See that? Nice. I'm looking at my whiskey glass, and there's little ripples going through it. And my first thought, if you look at it, you can scroll back in the tape. Maybe you can find me do this. My head goes like this. Whoa. Because my first thought wasn't earthquake, because there are ripples in the glass. My first thought is Jurassic Park, and I'm looking for the T-Rex around here. That was my first thought. It was like, I've only seen that one other place. But yeah, the desk was slightly rattling. So I think we had a minor earthquake. Thanks, fracking. Drill, baby, drill. So one thing what you both are talking about it is like our system is designed to be almost not designed to be, but our system is very easily taken advantage of, because there is so much freedom within the Constitution. There's so much freedom. That's supposed to be limiting what the government can do, not the people. So it's very easy to take advantage of our system. It's like, Josh, some of your least favorite presidents, Adams, Lincoln, during times of war, they had to make a tough decision. It's like, we're going to have to suspend rights, because if we keep doing this, our system is going to cause its own downfall, because it is so open. It is so easily taken advantage of. And this really hit me when Roger was saying people are going to do it anyway, like the midwife stuff. Of course it's going to happen, but at least we can scale that down to levels around, 1990 levels, but the simple fact is our system has so many loopholes in it that people find them. Roger Coldley.
No,
You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just like that's our system, and these presidents have made wrong decisions. Maybe you could call them wrong, but in those times, it's like, how do I keep this right in place and win this war? And maybe they made the wrong decision, but man, it's just our system is so easily taken advantage of, so easily.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, sticking kind of on the whole Latin America thing, Roger, how quick was the flash to bang to reverse on the president of Colombia yesterday?
It's funny, because it goes back to what Luke said, that at the very beginning, that there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of pushback. Trump is moving so fast that the media can't even keep up. And even X, right? X can't even keep up, because you've got so we're taking, illegals from Colombia, and we're going to fly them back. And the Colombian government, the president, Petro, not petroleum, but Petro, turns the plane back, basically say, you're not landing here, right? And so not 20-30 minutes right after that, he comes out on X and True Social, and is basically like, okay, that's great. I'm going to put a 25% tariff on your stuff. Oh, by the way, after 7 days, it's going to go to 50%. Oh, and by the way, all your visas and all that other crap that for Colombia, that ain't going to happen either. So during that time period, right, he releases that statement. The left is imploding. They're all over X. Valentine's Day is coming up, and all of our flowers come from Colombia, and be ready to pay twice as much for your coffee, which you're already paying twice as much for your coffee thanks to Joe. But anyway, you're going to pay twice as much more than what you were paying under Joe, and everybody was losing their minds, right? By the time they hit send, Petro had already come back and said, yeah, man, we're good. I'm going to actually use the presidential plane, and we're going to go ahead and land those illegals right here. And then right after that, and I think this is Petro trying to save face, right? He's like, well, we could consider tariffs on, in the U.S. too. It's like, we have like $5 billion worth of exports to Colombia a year, and most of that's petroleum. So how much more expensive do you really want to make gas down there?
Yeah.
And I think he did it to save face, right? But I think I can't believe we're still talking about this. It's the Trump of, it's come out with something completely nuts that everybody's like, oh my Lord, right? Clutching their pearls. And it's 10 on the Richter scale. And then when he well, one, in this case, it was effective because I think he's showing America's might, because we've forgotten that over the last few years. Or we haven't forgotten it, but you look at the U.S. government and a lot of the population, they've forgotten just how strong the U.S. is, not just militarily, but economically. Right? We have a lot of influence, but he comes out with something that's on a 10, and then anything he does to dial back, I mean, people bite at that. Whether he meant to do it or not, I mean, who knows? Would he ever enact a 50% tariff on Colombia? Maybe, maybe not. But I bet in his head, he's probably like, it'll never get to that point, because he knows where we stand. He knows what power we hold. But it was amazing because it was within an hour. It was within an hour. Yep. You can actually use my presidential plane for the illegals. Don't stink that thing up too bad.
It was so good, because that was just a great example of America first. I don't care. So we import 17% of our coffee from Colombia. The majority of our coffee we import from Brazil. I happily will buy coffee from Brazil to stick it to Colombia because they don't want to take their own citizens back. You know why Colombia is one of the largest exporters of cut flowers? We used to be, but thanks W, conservative, right? Signed that free trade deal, which destroyed the $4 billion U.S. cut flower industry that existed out in California around Monterey. So again, something another conservative, and I'm using air quotes here for those of you who are watching on YouTube. When I say conservative, it was something conservatives didn't conserve it, but it was great. And the pearl clutching from the left, it's still going on today. They're still talking about it. They're still talking about, well, he showed Trump he's going to send his planes up there and get them himself and fly them home, with dignity. It was like, that's not the win that you think it is.
I don't care how they get home.
Yeah, exactly. And now Honduras has started, saying, well, we're not going to accept any flights either. And, we're going to close down Soto Cano Air Base. It's like, you really want to do that, Hondo? You really want to close down Soto Cano? Okay.
Just goes to show you, man. I mean, the first sniff I got of what was going on was always on X. And it was always at least 2 hours before any mainstream outlet picked it up. And I even texted you guys, what was it, Sunday, when all this stuff went down. I was like, hey, I'm seeing rumblings of this, but I haven't got anything confirmed. And then it started coming out, and you guys started seeing it in your feed. That's where we got the news, was from X. And I think that's great, man. I think that's awesome. So that's why we were so far ahead of people like AOC, because her staff is still using the mainstream. Well, we got to get this confirmed report. I mean, good Lord, she made herself look like a complete ass, which is
can't even keep up.
Hard to do. So with the Colombia thing, kind of a lot to say on it, but these countries, Cynical Publius, you guys know, we've been reading his stuff on X, really great account to follow, who this morning he got retweeted by JD Vance, Elon Musk, and I think Matt saw that. Crazy. Good on him, man. I'm happy for that dude, because he put some good stuff out there. But he laid out this post, and it's like these leaders are thinking we're doing things like they were being done under Biden and even in Trump's first term. It's like, okay, so, oh my gosh, they turned away a flight. This is the way it used to be done. They turned away a flight. We need to hold a meeting in the State Department. We have to bring in DHS. We have to bring in USAID and State Department. We got to come up with a position paper. That position paper is going to take 2 weeks to write, and it's going to go to the SecDef, Sec State, and the Sec State's going to be like, I don't like the wording right here. Change it. It's going to take another 2 weeks. Then DC is going to be shut down by a snowstorm for 3 days. And then they're going to get the position paper. In Colombia, we're going to come out with this like, okay, we can bring in 1 flight a month, and we're going to give you $2 billion to help, settle them back in your country. That's how it used to be. That's how they're thinking. So Petro, he's like, man, I'm really going to throw a wrench into this. Watch this. So he did that. Well, we're not living on those rules anymore. And man, I can only imagine the calls he got 20 minutes into that post. he probably got calls from like the flower cartel in Colombia. It's like, you realize that Valentine's Day is coming up and you're going to cost us maybe $100 million. And he's getting a call from this and from that and from the Ministry of Defense. It's like, are you crazy? We've got all these things in place. You cannot do this. He reversed course, and now we're under a new regime. We've just eliminated 2 months of bureaucracy. It's a new world. It's very interesting with Colombia. My understanding is Petro is on thin ice anyway. He's not going to win again. But it's like, if he was gangster, if he was real, Roger said it, they import, the majority of the $5 billion off petroleum. If he was gangster, oh, well, he'd just go and make a deal with Venezuela. But let me tell you why that's never going to happen. Because they'd string him up on a noose in downtown Bogota. The Colombian people are not going to stand for a petroleum deal with Venezuela because those two people hate each other. So it's like, that was a bad calculation on Petro's part. It's interesting because I had just given a class a couple of weeks ago saying how great of allies Colombia and the U.S. are, and we still are. Like, fundamentally, all those, classified sharing, agreements between Colombia and U.S. are still in place. All that stuff's still in place.
By the way, the Justice Department just fired a dozen lawyers who prosecuted Trump.
Along with 19 AGs yesterday.
I love it. I
glorious.
love it.
It is glorious. But we were saying, this whole Colombia thing, and maybe we can transition into something else. I might kick it to Roger. Maybe he knows where I'm going with this. But I said, and we all agreed, that China is watching this whole situation very, very closely, because this is kind of the first tariff leverage. It really, really is. And it worked. And China's like, I was thinking the last thing Trump can do is back off this. He cannot back off. And he didn't. But, with China, I don't know. Y'all want to talk about the other thing, the China thing?
Yeah, let's do it, man. Let's do it. It's
current
big.
events.
There's a lot to cover. There's a lot to cover.
You take it away.
So one, I just do want to touch base on the tariffs. You do not, and this is just my guess, you do not want to be the first country to try to call Trump's bluff on this. I'm imagining. And I think that was, like you said, the flower cartel and everybody else, with Petro's like, hey, man, I am not going to be the example on the world stage. And, you look at what Trump did in 2017 with China. He already put tariffs on Chinese goods. Matter of fact, they were so good that Biden had to keep them throughout his term, right? And his staffer's term and whoever else was running the White House. But big news of the day with China. And this brought down, well, I tell you right now, we are not fiduciaries, but I think some of our folks here, not me, but some of our folks here picked up some NVIDIA today. But a lot of folks noticed that NVIDIA was down. I think Meta was down. The market was down for a lot of the day, and they kind of recovered towards the end. But DeepSeek AI, okay? So everybody's familiar with like Grok. Everybody's familiar with like ChatGPT, OpenAI, that type of stuff. And when you look at NVIDIA, what they see themselves, because everybody thinks of AI and data processing and chips and this and that. And the NVIDIA CEO came out several months ago and said, hey, when they asked, like, hey, what kind of company are you? Are you an AI company? Are you a software company? He's like, no, we're a big data company, right? Because that's what supports all of it. That's what supports everything, but large language models, AI, all that stuff, it's big data. And all we've heard over the last several years, and particularly over the last year, is how much, how resource intensive it is. It's got to be bigger. Got to go billions of dollars, $60 billion. You're going to have data centers the size of Manhattan. More money. And it's a big factor because a lot of these are publicly traded companies, right? So they need to invest more money. They take more money in from investors, their stock values, all that other stuff. That's how they fund a lot of this stuff, and they sell product. Well, DeepSeek AI, and I forget the guy's name, but basically a Chinese dude. I think he was part of a venture capital group. So they claim, okay, so I say this up front. So one, it is the number one app as of this recording. It was the number one app in productivity and the number one app on the Apple Store. Okay, and it's basically it's a chat GPT. It's a Chinese chat GPT or Grok. And what they claim is that they have the same benchmarks as OpenAI, and they were able to do it for $5.5 million. And they were able to use it with, and I don't even know what generation, but older generation NVIDIA chips, because there are some, we talk about the sanctions and this and that. There's certain uh, electronics that China cannot have, right? So they claim to be able to, they were doing it with 100 older NVIDIA chips, 5.5, whatever, $6 million. And they were able to come out with benchmark testing that was equal to OpenAI. So I'll give you kind of my thoughts on this first, and then we can kick it around. So, one, you have no idea. It's a Chinese company, okay? And so you have no idea if the data they were even putting out there is true. You would probably say, I would guess that they are subsidized by the Chinese government. Okay, how much that is, I don't know. Now, it's not to say that what they've done is not a huge feat. They call it their Sputnik moment. I don't know if it's the Sputnik moment. Okay, it will be. I think we're going to see a lot more rollout, because that the Meta folks, that the Grok folks, X, that the OpenAI folks, the Chat GPT folks, they're going to be looking at this stuff, right? So now there is some truth to this, because what they did, and here's the whole premise of it. They're basically able to do this through more efficiently, less costs, probably subsidized by the Chinese government. But on the other side, they are also breaking down complex tasks through reinforcement techniques without human interface, okay, distillation, and chain of thought prompting. So basically, I'm going to boil this down to you, and then I'll kick it over to Luke. And this is where the truth is. You have a complex problem. And a lot of times, if you try to solve that complex problem in one bite, it becomes very cumbersome, right? And it can become too difficult, bogs down the system, it takes too long. And the other problem with that is, if there's too much in there, when you start talking about large language models, because you're looking at a computer that's interpreting what you're putting in, what your prompts are, what you're saying, what you're asking. And if it's too complex, you'll get the wrong answer. And what they've done with this new technique, I don't know, it's not a new technique. The chain of thought prompting and reinforcement technique is basically break down complex tasks into individual tasks. Okay, so as opposed to, well, I'll give you an example here. So I pulled this off the internet. So actually, the guy's name is Roger. So the model input, standard prompting, Roger has 5 tennis balls. He buys 2 more cans of tennis balls. Each can has 3 tennis balls. How many tennis balls does he have now? The answer is 11. Cafeteria has 23 apples. If they use 20 apples to make lunch and bought 6 more, how many apples do they have? The answer is 27. That would be your standard model output from ChatGPT or Grok or whatever. Chain of thought prompting is, Roger has 5 tennis balls. He buys 2 more cans of tennis balls. Each can has 3 tennis balls. How many tennis balls does he have now? The answer is, Roger started with 5 balls. 2 cans of 3 tennis balls each is 6 tennis balls. 5 plus 6 is 11. The answer is 11. So I don't know if you see where I'm going with this, but what they're doing is they're actually showing the steps. And by showing each step, each sentence there, Roger started with 5 balls. That's a smaller task, okay, of a more complex problem, more complex question. 2 cans of 3 tennis balls each is 6 tennis balls. That's another small task. 5 plus 6 equals 11. So the answer is 11. So they've basically taken that complex task or more complex task and broken it down into a bunch of simpler tasks to answer. The other part of that, which is huge, and I think this is going to get shut down, this is where we're going to start to see some of the stuff come out, is distillation. What they've done with the complex tasks are they've basically just farmed that stuff out. They said, hey, man, we're going to ask OpenAI to do it. That's how they save money. It's like, we're going to ask OpenAI to do the complex tasks. We're going to ask ChatGPT to do the complex tasks. We're going to ask Grok to do the complex tasks. I'm going to continue working on the simple task, and then I'll get those answers and I'll merge them together, right? What's cool about it is pretty neat with the reinforcement technique without human interface is, and Luke, you're really good at this. Luke talks about all the time where he's trying to look for policies, or how to write this or how to write that, or what's the argument for this or that. And he goes down several prompts. I got to ask it this way, and I got to ask it that way. And this is what I've got to do to get the answer that he's looking for, or the correct answer. And what that is, that's the human interface to this, right? It's continuing prompting that Luke is having to do. And what the reinforcement technique that they're using is, it does it without the human interface. It breaks that down into those individual tasks. And it really, and this to me is the whiz bang part of it, is they are really trying to get to the intent of your prompt by simplifying it. Okay, simplifying the parts and really saying, hey, really asking itself, if you can ask itself, what is Luke really trying to get to? Okay. And you get that by breaking down that complex task into simpler tasks and then coming out with the answer, which is supposed to be more accurate. Now, the reason why it's a big deal is if they're able to do this for $6 million in 2 months, but Meta and NVIDIA are talking about they need billions and billions of dollars in a data center the size of Manhattan to do this. Well, as an investor, right? As a consumer, I'm like, okay, those two don't match. So before I kick it to you, Luke, my guess is I'm betting the analysts over at NVIDIA, Meta, and X, OpenAI. I'm betting they are going to dissect this thing. One, they're going to shut off their fire hose access to their platforms. That's number one thing I would do. And I'm betting their analysts starting to tear this thing apart over the next few weeks, few months. Because here's the other piece: DeepSeek AI is open source. Okay. So you can run it standalone, but here's the other side to this. Look at what questions people ask right now with ChatGPT and OpenAI and Grok. Now, if you go on DeepSeek AI servers and ask these questions, where do you think all that information goes back to? Goes right back to China. So I won't get into the privacy piece yet. I'll let you guys both kind of throw out your opinions on there. But I'm expecting Analyst Man to come out and tear this thing apart, right? In the next several weeks, couple months. You start to poke holes in this stuff.
It'll be, I think, quicker than that. Whatever venture capitalist, funded that. I'm glad that they made a lot of money. And speaking of which, while Roger's talking, all that's going through my head is Booger from Revenge of the Nerds. Nerds. Roger nerded out on us there for a second, but I appreciate it. But I'll tell you this: Roger started out with no balls. Okay, let's just get that, or maybe he started out with two, but then he got married and whatever. So it's debatable.
Whatever, man.
Right?
Now, that's when I lost them. Yeah.
See, yeah, that's what I'm saying. Roger. Yeah, good luck trying to parse that open AI or your new Chinese whatever knockoff smart geek, whatever it's called. So look, I want to get into this real quick. The technicalities, I'm not going to go off the technicalities on this one. I'm going to maybe I'll delve into the technicalities like you have. What I'm going to go off is what I've observed over the past 30 years with the way China does business and the way China does innovation and things like that. I think that first of all, 5.6 billion, that really doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, of course. That's huge, huge. And that's why NVIDIA fell so much today. What I'm really suspect on is the amount of power they're saying it's taking. They're saying it's taking a tenth or less of the power it takes, the electricity, the energy it takes to, power OpenAI.
I think it was 1/30th.
I mean, it's crazy. Fact is, number one, I don't believe it, because in order to do business in China, you've got to be dealing with the CCP as well. I think this is a great operation. Actually, I think this is an Intel-driven Ministry of State Security type thing, where they can crash NVIDIA for a little while by putting out a product that, OpenAI has known about for a long time. They just figured out a different way to do it. I think it takes more power, all that stuff. That's how they get to number one on the charts. Exactly. So you put it out there, they're making a lot of money today. My point is this: the reason U.S. kicks so much ass in this world and has for such a long time is entrepreneurs and venture capitalists and people who are willing to put their money into research and development. This is par for the course. It's what I've seen from China for a long time. They ride on the backs of giants, basically. They rip everything off. They may put their own little spin on it, make it better in this particular area, but you did not come up with that. That is not yours. You sat on the backs of giants, or whatever they say. Now, what Sam Altman and Elon Musk and all these people are doing, the reason people put so much money into those guys is for the innovation that they're creating. I guarantee you, ChatGPT and OpenAI and some of these other platforms, this Star Chamber, whatever they're calling it, the Star Door, Stargate, right? The $100 billion investment in AI, they're probably 20 steps ahead of, where this Chinese AI model is right now. I think this was a good move on the Chinese part. Now they're collecting a bunch of data they weren't yesterday. And anybody who downloaded this onto their phone or onto their computer, you're an idiot. I know you're a listener, and that's great. But if you downloaded this stuff and are using it on your own personal computer or phone, you're an idiot. Stop it. I'll stop just short of saying the same thing with TikTok, but don't do it. I'm talking to Diego. If you listen, don't do it, bro. But yeah, I'm not too worried right now about this. I think NVIDIA, OpenAI, I think they're 10 steps ahead of this. They're still in the development phase. They still need that big investment, but that's why it's a good move on the Chinese part. Now it's making these investors kind of worried. Whoa. So it's a great op by the Chinese. It's a great op, but I think it's old technology. I think it's Google on steroids, basically.
Look at the data they're getting, though.
Unbelievable, a huge data coup, and they'll be able to do whatever they want with it, and not just spy. It's a money thing as well. So those are my thoughts on it. I appreciate you, Roger. I did listen to you. I didn't mean to say you geeked out. You did, but that was a good way to put it.
You guys, the only thing I have to say about it is you guys know who rang the closing bell at NASDAQ today? The Chinese Consulate General.
Oh, you have got to be kidding me.
Nope.
Oh, that was on purpose.
Oh, yeah.
This has been planned for a while.
Yep, 100%. Wow. So I know we're getting close on time, so I'm going to give my thoughts on what Trump should do the next 100 days, and then I'll kick it over to you two, so you guys can give yours. So my recommendation: do Trump full tilt, no rest, foot on the gas, zero quarter, no mercy. Continue doing what you're doing. He's got to keep the media on their heels in reactive mode. He's got 24 months. He doesn't have 2 years. He's got 24 months before he loses either the Senate or the House. All right, 24 months to get that mandate done. Pick your battles. Don't respond to every single attack. You don't have to. Just let them wail and gnash their teeth into the air, regardless of what side it comes from. But what I'll say about the GOP, right? Because the GOP is already churning, right? The Tom Tillises, the Murkowskis. For too long, the right has been afraid to push back. They've been afraid to say no. For far too long, people followed Buckley's lead and turned the right into a debate club rather than into an accomplishing club. What have establishment, and I want our listeners to think about this, what have establishment conservatives conserved over the last 30 years? What have conservatives conserved? Those people out there that hate Trump, that like to, hang out and, with the establishment Republicans, what have they conserved over the last 30 years? Nothing. We've given power to men desperate to be liked, men more interested in being called respectable by their enemies than being called fearless by their friends. They're nothing more. They are the Bolsheviks of the right. They're no more respectable than the Bolsheviks that are on the left. Right? What we need more of, we need J.D. Vance. We need J.D. Vance's interview with Margaret Brennan. And she was like trying to get him into that trap time and time again. It was like, well, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? I don't really care, Margaret. It was the best. The response to unreasonable demands from unreasonable people should always and emphatically be no. So that's it.
I don't have a prepared speech. I left it in my other jacket. So
I was fired up. I was fired up earlier.
I know, and I know you want to talk about that more. So what we should do is record later this week, because next week is out, and then talk about that a little bit. But I next 100 days, I will say I agree with Josh 100%. Foot on the gas, even with nominees I don't agree with. Foot on the gas, get them through. Makes a statement. Shout outs, usual suspects and everything. There's a lot of people I didn't know listen that do, and I appreciate that. Like Matt out of Baltimore, I didn't know he listened. Appreciate you listening, Matt. I was kind of shocked.
I didn't know he did either.
Yeah,
Thanks, Matt.
He listens. Next door neighbor, I'm not going to say his name because next door neighbor, you start putting two and two together. Well, this guy's name is Luke. Get this first name. OpenAI will pinpoint our location, dox us in no time at all. Next door neighbor, really appreciate you listening. And he started at episode 1. I told you guys that. I was like, dude, you need to skip ahead like 70.
But we owe that dude a bottle of bourbon.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's good to have the band back together. Appreciate y'all listening. We always say this. We'll endeavor to persevere to get more episodes out there. But again, thanks for giving us your time. Until next time, keep your canteen cups full and tightly secured.